Hello there, a warm welcome to African News, bringing you the top stories on the continent, the headlines. The WHO attempts to demystify the Ebola epidemic spreading through West Africa. This as it warns cases of the virus will surpass 9,000 this week. All eyes on Mozambique as the country heads to the polls on Wednesday. The nation stands on the cusp of reaping vast wealth from its nascent gas industry. And set to appear in court next week, Ivory Coast ex-First Lady Simone Gbagbo prepares to face charges of endangering the state amid post-election violence in 2010 and 11. But first to our top story. Health workers in Liberia have reportedly ended a strike over demands for danger money to treat Ebola patients. The news comes after authorities earlier threatened to sack a minority of staff who took strike action. Meanwhile, the World Health Organization warns the number of Ebola cases in West Africa will surpass 9,000 this week as the epidemic expands. Well, earlier the WHO called journalists for an e-press conference aimed at demystifying the deadly virus. Belle Lipton reports.
From the World Health Organization headquarters in Geneva, fighting talk.
You got to find the chains of transmission, and the goal is that by 60 days we can identify all those chains of transmission and we know where this disease actually is.
It was a press conference designed to cut through the misinformation surrounding a global Ebola epidemic, and the UN agency was candid about the figures.
50% of people are not surviving. It's 30% at most in these countries. So this is, again, a high mortality disease.
The Ebola virus has continued to tighten its grip, hitting Sierra Leone, Liberia and Guinea the hardest. The WHO gave the latest figures, 8,914 cases so far, set to increase to over 9,000 cases this week. As of Tuesday morning, the number of reported deaths stood at 4,447. But he said it was impossible to stick to any statistics in an ever-changing situation. The true number of Ebola cases in Liberia is likely to be 2.5 times more than reported. The WHO's been criticised by MSF, among others, for its delay in declaring Ebola an international public health emergency. Its new strategy aims to isolate 70% of suspected Ebola cases and safely bury 70% of the dead within the next 60 days. Unless that happens, it says, there'll be a dramatic increase in Ebola cases.
In other news, protesters in the Nigerian capital have taken to the streets to mark 6 months since over 200 schoolgirls were abducted by Boko Haram militants. Members of the Bring Back Our Girls campaign are gathered in Abuja demanding answers to the whereabouts of the girls kidnapped on April 14th in Chibok, northeast Nigeria. Since the abduction, there's been no concrete information on their location. Family members fear interest into the girls' plight is dwindling.
If I have the keys to where the girls are, I want to open it and bring them back, because it's 180 days, and if anything we desire is that we want them back.
Mozambicans go to the polls on Wednesday for presidential, legislative and provincial elections. The nation's on the cusp of reaping vast wealth from its nascent gas industry. This exclusive report takes a closer look at the ruling Frelimo party and the main opposition Renamo. Feuding between the camps dates back to Mozambique's almost 30-year-long civil war.
Graça Machel was among those supporting Frelimo at its last rally on Sunday. To South Africans, she was Nelson Mandela's third wife. But to Mozambicans, she remains the widow of their first president, Samora Machel. Mozambicans are proud of their revolutionary history. 70-year-old Armando Guebuza steps down as head of state with this election. His Minister of Defense, Filipe Nyusi, has been picked to lead the country in an era of economic growth.
We're going to develop the country. We're going to progress more and more.
In 39 years of independence, the Liberating Party has never lost an election.
No change. No change Frelimo. Frelimo is one very nice Frelimo.
If Frelimo is as old as Mozambique, arguably so is Renamo, the party fighting this election. The outlawed rebel movement came out of the bush in 1992 to form an opposition party. But for the past couple of years, Renamo operatives have taken up their weapons against Frelimo rule. A peace agreement was signed in August. Renamo leader Afonso Dhlakama left the bush to campaign. He forced the authorities to create an independent electoral commission. He has no intention of losing this time.
All these laws, they are here to defend us. We have them to avoid fraud. We are protected and we fear nobody, no party, no police, because the electoral law this time is on our side.
There's a third party contesting this election. MDM has experienced a dramatic rise in popularity in recent elections, and its leaders have already claimed that the election run-up has not been free and fair.
We had lots of posters. We stuck them on the wall, but in 2 or 3 days they disappeared. People were tearing them up in front of policemen who did nothing.
Whichever party wins, there's still much work to improve the lives of one of the poorest peoples in the world. But in the tropical waters offshore lie natural gas reserves as vast as Qatar's. Mozambicans will have to work hard to reconcile its inequalities.
The whereabouts of Madagascar's former president Marc Ravalomanana remains unknown a day after his surprise return from exile. According to his family, police arrested Ravalomanana, who was ousted in a 2009 coup shortly after he arrived on the Indian Ocean island. France 24's Gaël Bourgier is in the Madagascan capital with the latest.
There's been no news about where the former president is since he was arrested yesterday. Some journalists said he was seen at an airport on the west coast, apparently in a helicopter surrounded by military men. But this info hasn't been confirmed. Some suggested that Ravalomanana is under house arrest outside the capital. But for the moment, we only have rumors. Even his family say they have no clear information and are worried. Ravalomanana's son called on the president to let him see his dad.
Harry Rajaonarimampianina kidnapped President Marc Ravalomanana. We're asking those in power to prove to us that Marc Ravalomanana is unharmed. We, his family, demand to see him immediately.
Some pro-Ravalomanana MPs have strongly condemned the arrest of their leader. They announced today that they would no longer support current President Air. They are now officially opponents.
France 24's Gaël Bourgier reporting from Madagascar there. Well, finally, the trial of Ivory Coast ex-First Lady Simone Gbagbo will begin next week in Abidjan. The 65-year-old faces charges of endangering the safety of the state during post-election violence in 2010 and 11. Unlike her husband, Laurent Gbagbo, Ivory Coast refused to transfer the former First Lady to the International Criminal Court. Abidjan says their legal system is now ready to try such cases. Nicolas Germain reports.
Simone Gbagbo will be tried next week with 90 other supporters of the former president. Her lawyer says she's not at all worried.
Among all our clients, she's the most serene. She believes in Ivory Coast's justice system. She always wanted to be tried here. She wants a fair trial. She has no reason to be stressed.
Simone Gbagbo is charged for her role during the post-electoral crisis. Before the Gbagbo couple's arrest in April 2011, she organised numerous rallies where she called Alassane Ouattara a bandit. An evangelical Christian, she regularly denounced what she called French neo-colonialism and said God had chosen her husband.
God is fighting our struggle. He has already given us our victory.
She married Laurent Gbagbo in 1989 and became his most loyal ally. When she was an activist, she was imprisoned several times. She became Ivory Coast First Lady in the year 2000. It's during that decade that her image became tarnished. She was accused of being linked to death squads who killed opposition members and of having been involved in the disappearance of journalist Guy-André Kiefer. Next week, she'll only be tried for her role in the post-election crisis. Human rights organisations denounce a victor's justice in Ivory Coast. They point out that so far not one major ally of Alassane Ouattara has been tried following the violence against Gbagbo supporters after the 2010 election.
Right, well, more from your Africa team in 45 minutes' time. Up next, it's Mark Owen with international headlines.
The 51%.
A programme about the women making headlines in international news. Influential women, human rights activists or victims of discrimination. From Paris to New Delhi, from Washington to Tunis, every week the 51% highlights the women who are fighting to change a world largely dominated by men.
The 51% on France 24 and on France24.com.